Welcome to Military Analytics. Alexander Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, who is said to have held talks with senior U.S. officials, has stunned the whole world with his move. This move by Lukashenko, who did not allow the Russian army to enter Ukraine from Belarusian territory, drove Russian leader Vladimir Putin crazy. Putin called an emergency meeting at the Kremlin Palace and held a private meeting with Valery Gerasimov, the chief of the Russian General Staff. Putin, who wanted to expand the territories he occupied in Ukraine, wanted to launch a major ground offensive across the border with Belarus. Putin was aware that he would quickly occupy the capital, Kiev, if he entered Ukrainian territory through the Belarusian border, and has started troop shipments to Belarus. This plan of the Russian army, which planned to move towards Kiev with a large army, was presented in a very interesting way. The unexpected move of Belarusian President Lukashenko drove Russian leader Vladimir Putin crazy. Here are the details of the news. U.S. intelligence service officials recently informed Ukrainian government officials that there was a great deal of activity on Belarus's border with Ukraine, and that the Russian army could launch a new attack on Ukrainian territory through Belarus. Shortly after this warning, it was learned that the Russian government started to organize a large military deployment to the Belarusian border with the order of Russian Chief of General Staff Valery Gerasimov and the S-400 air defense systems. A large number of tanks and armored vehicles started to be shipped to the Belarusian border territory. When the images of the shipment, which was carried out by train, were video recorded by the people of the region and shared on social media platforms, the eyes of the whole world turned to Putin again. Russian leader Putin has started to increase security measures on the Belarusian border by making 3 different military shipments to the Belarusian border in the last week. The Russian army, which placed air defense systems on Belarusian border lands, interestingly, began to protect Belarusian territory. Afterwards, it was noticed that Putin had deployed a large number of armored vehicles and tanks here started to transfer many Russian troops fighting in Ukraine to the Belarusian border. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said that the U.S. intelligence service has reported that there is a great deal of activity on the borders of Belarus and that Russia could launch a new attack on Ukraine from there. The U.S. Minister Austin's response to these statements was not too late. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu denied the accusations, saying that the military shipments sent to the Belarusian border were for an exercise and that Belarusian soldiers would be trained. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, who allegedly met with senior U.S. officials in recent months, did not object to the Russian troops entering the Belarusian border. In response to Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky, who decided to increase security measures on the border with Belarus, started to deploy nearly 10,000 Ukrainian troops to the Belarusian border to take precautions against a new Russian attack. Zelensky has asked for support from his Western allies, saying that the Ukrainian army needs more tanks and long-range missiles. While the whole world was waiting for the Russian army to launch a new attack on Ukrainian territory through the Belarusian borders, Belarusian leader Lukashenko surprised everyone by closing the border gates to Russian troops. With a sudden change of decision, Lukashenko activated the Belarusian border guards and started to take major security measures at the Belarusian border gates. Thousands of Belarusian soldiers are trying to ensure border security in order to prevent the Russian army from crossing Ukrainian territory. However, Lukashenko's move surprised Putin and many Western leaders. The Russian army was trapped in Belarusian territory after the Belarusian army prevented Russian troops from crossing into Ukrainian territory. Confused Russian leader Vladimir Putin asked for a meeting with his counterpart, Alexander Lukashenko. But the Belarusian government rejected Putin's request for a meeting. According to sources close to the Kremlin, the Russian government believes that Alexander Lukashenko has reached an agreement with the United States. However, according to war analysts, Lukashenko is trying to distance himself from Russia for a very different reason. War analysts say that Lukashenko is aware that the Russian army is losing the war on the territory of Ukraine and is now trying to get closer to the US and Western countries instead of Russia. However, Lukashenko's move has left a big question in mind. Will Vladimir Putin impose any sanctions on Belarus over Lukashenko's move? We do not know the answer to this yet, but Vladimir Putin and Alexander Lukashenko are expected to hold a meeting in the coming weeks. After 15 months of occupying Ukrainian territory, the Russian army has started to lose many of the territories it occupied. The Russian army, which managed to quickly occupy Ukrainian territory in the first months of the war, is now trying to protect the captured territories. Russian forces, which have moved from an offensive position to a defensive position, have been in a very difficult situation recently. Russian leader Vladimir Putin, who wanted to resume his occupation in Ukraine, wanted to make a move that would turn the course of the war back in favor of Russia. However, Alexander Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, who is known to have good relations with Vladimir Putin, did not allow Putin to proceed according to his plan. The Russian army could have been advancing towards the capital, Kiev. Why Lukashenko made this move is still a matter of curiosity. While this tension between Russia and Belarus continues, Russian leader Vladimir Putin has faced one betrayal after another. The number of Iranian-made unmanned warplanes used by the Russian army to launch airstrikes on Ukrainian territory has greatly reduced. Putin, who has built unmanned fighter jets from Iran again in recent months, now wants to send these unmanned fighter jets back to Iran because they are broken. Unmanned combat drones that Iran, known as Russia's allies, sold to Russia turned out to be unusable. The Iranian government refuses to take back these broken unmanned combat drones sold to Russia. But did Iran really sell unmanned fighter jets to Russia that were not yet ready? Russia claims that they cannot use the unmanned fighter jets purchased from Iran due to systemic failures. Putin, who is known to have secretly purchased unmanned fighter jets from Iran after Turkey's announcement that it would not sell unmanned fighter jets to Russia, is in trouble. U.S. officials have repeatedly stated that the Iranian government wants Su-35 fighter jets from Russia in exchange for these unmanned fighter jets. Immediately after this agreement between Russia and Iran, the Iranian government shipped the unmanned fighter jets to Russia, and the Russian military conducted the first tests a few days after this agreement was reached. And during the first tests, it was discovered that these unmanned fighter jets purchased from Iran were missing parts and therefore could not take official. This indicated that in the first trials conducted by the Russian military, the Iranian unmanned combat drones had systemic errors and were not fully efficient. However, it was later understood that these unmanned fighter jets were completely broken. It is also reported that the Russian government is not at all satisfied with the unmanned fighter jets from Iran. This issue has come up many times before, but the source of this information remains a mystery. It is still a matter of curiosity whether Iran, which has been supporting the Russian army since the beginning of the war, is doing this deliberately. Even though the U.S. administration has warned Iran against providing military equipment to Russia, the Iranian government continues to send covert support to Russia. Israeli intelligence service officials say that cargo planes belonging to the Russian Defense Ministry arrived from Russia at the Iranian borders, and that they detected that these cargo planes were carrying military equipment and unmanned fighter jets belonging to the Iranian army. It seems that the Russian military will continue to commit war crimes with these unmanned warplanes on Ukrainian territory. The U.S. administration may warn Iran again in the near future. When Russia started its invasion attempt on Ukrainian lands, it aimed to win many regions, especially Kiev. But things didn't go as Vladimir Putin had planned. Kiev troops repeatedly defeated the Russians on the front lines. This success instilled confidence in the Kiev troops. Now, Kiev's target was the historical peninsula of the Black Sea. President of Ukraine Zelensky drew a picture of how the war would end by saying that Crimea is Ukraine. Zelensky often emphasized that the move that would win the war was Crimea. Kiev's target determined the route of the drones. The latest drone strike in Crimea took place last day. Russia accused Ukraine of carrying out an armed drone attack on the Russian naval base in Sevastopol on the Crimean Peninsula. Video footage of the attack was shared on local Telegram channels. Powerful explosions were noticeable in the video of the footage. The sound of the explosions was strong enough to be heard from many parts of the port city. It also revealed the intensity of the explosions, with huge sparks reaching the sky. In a statement made by the Russian Ministry of Defense, it was reported that the attack took place around 3:30 am. According to the statement, the Kiev regime tried to attack the Black Sea Fleet's base in Sevastopol with 3 unmanned high-speed boats. The ministry clarified that drones attacking Sevastopol and Crimea were launched from Odessa waters designated for the implementation of the grain agreement. In the statement, it was stated that all 3 Navy-armed drones used in the attack were destroyed. Russia's defense ministry said there were no casualties or injuries in the attack. There was no statement from Ukraine on the subject for the most part. Kyiv does not formally take responsibility for attacks in areas belonging to or under Russian control. But the Kyiv administration emphasizes the country's right to hit any target in response to Russian aggression, beginning with Ukraine's long-awaited spring counteroffensive. Retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, who served as a commander of the U.S. Army Europe, outlined 3 stages in which Kyiv troops could capture Crimea. Hodges stated that there are various ways that Ukrainians think about this issue, and stated that Ukrainians know geography, history, and weather conditions. U.S. Army General Hodges stated that he thinks Kyiv has near-perfect intelligence about what is happening in Crimea. According to Hodges, it will not be able to secure Kyiv's commercial shipping in the Black Sea unless it liberates the peninsula. Veteran General Hodges said that even the major ports of Odessa and Mykolaiv, both firmly under Ukrainian control, will continue to be threatened by Crimea. As it is known, Sevastopol passed under Russian control with Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014. Sevastopol has been subject to multiple airstrikes since Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. Russian officials blamed Ukraine for the attacks. In addition, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced that the Ukrainian attack on the Russian Black Sea Fleet with drones in Sevastopol violated the guarantees and jeopardized the extension of the Black Sea Grain Agreement. In the statement made by the ministry, it was reminded that Russia suspended the agreement on the export of grain products from Ukrainian ports as Ukraine attacked the Russian Black Sea Fleet ships and civilian ships tasked with ensuring the security of the Black Sea grain corridor with unmanned vehicles in October. In the statement, it was emphasized that this agreement was renewed only thanks to Turkey's guarantees and Ukraine's written commitments not to use its ports and humanitarian corridor in military actions against Russia. The Russian Ministry of Defense has expressed its concern about the offensive actions of the Kyiv regime that jeopardize the possible extension of the grain agreement after May 18. Russian authorities called for accountability for violations of international norms and guarantees regarding the use of humanitarian corridors. Russia is trying to intimidate Ukraine by putting forward the grain agreement. At the same time, fearing Kyiv's counterattack, Russia is beginning to increase its security measures in Crimea. Tensions seem to be rising on the peninsula as Russia prepares for an expected counterattack from Ukraine. Recent satellite images show Russia building a network of defense lines in Crimea and ditches being dug along the peninsula's beaches. Crimea's unique geographical challenges pose many dangers to aggressors. The political significance of Crimea for President Vladimir Putin means that Russian troops and sympathetic local populations can be expected to make a determined defense there. So what can Kyiv do to mitigate the Russian threat from Crimea? Crimea can be isolated by cutting the land bridge. The land bridge, which stretches from the southwestern Russian border west of Rostov-on-Don to occupy Donetsk, Mariupol, Berdyansk, Melitopol, and the Dnieper River, is Moscow's greatest achievement in more than a year of war. The corridor allows Russia to better supply the Crimean Peninsula, which until February 2022 was dependent on the Kerch Strait Bridge, which is enriched with shipping. A Ukrainian journey south from Zaporizhia and east from Kherson could endanger this vital corridor if Ukrainian forces can reach the threshold of Crimea. Many of the peninsula's most sensitive military and infrastructure targets will be in range. Ukrainian troops have proven adept at using domestic technology as well as long-range Western munitions to target Russian command posts, troop concentrations, and supply centers. Crimea offers multiple targets, including the Sevastopol Naval Base and the Saki Air Base, both of which have already been attacked in the second stage of the attack. Important bases must be bombarded. Kyiv should use Western weapons in this bombardment. As a result, the direction of Kyiv's anticipated offensive is not yet clear. The eastern part of Kherson is a likely location as it offers the shortest route to Crimea. On the other hand, a local official in Russia announced that they found a drone covered with explosives crashed into the ground in the forest area in the northeastern part of Moscow. Russian military bloggers speculated that a Ukrainian counterattack could be accompanied by a series of drone strikes over large areas. Russian media determined that the unmanned aerial vehicle that fell near Moscow was the Ukrainian-made UG-22 airborne. The UG-22 is a small reconnaissance aircraft that can carry around 20 kilograms of explosives and has an autonomous flight range of up to 800 kilometers. Russian media said that the drone was found by a local resident. Reports claim that the drone crashed after running out of fuel or crashing into a tree. While the Kyiv troops are thought to be preparing for a spring counterattack to retake the occupied territories, the drone, located in the forest area, once again underlined Ukraine's ability to reach deep within Russia. Last month, another drone, which authorities suspect also came from Ukraine, was found in Shelkovo, about 15 kilometers northeast of Moscow, despite not carrying explosives. Also in March, a heavy Ukrainian Tu-141 Stride jet-powered drone exploded in the city of Kirovsk in the Tula region, about 200 kilometers east of Moscow. 3 people were injured as a result of the explosion, leaving a large crater and many buildings damaged. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that the drone was shot down by air defense. Russian officials stated that Ukraine used Soviet-made Tu-141 unmanned aerial vehicles with a range of about 1,000 kilometers to strike facilities in Russia. In December, such drones struck 2 Russian air bases for long-range nuclear-capable bombers. The Russian Ministry of Defense stated that the drones were shot down, but Russian officials admitted that the wreckage damaged some planes and killed many soldiers. In February, authorities also reported that a Ukrainian drone dove in the Kolomna district, about 80 kilometers southeast of Moscow. The drone crashed near its obvious target, a large natural gas pumping plant. Another drone exploded in February in a forest near Kaluga, about 150 kilometers southeast of Moscow, harming no one. When we look at the cross-border operations carried out by Ukraine, we realize how assertive they are about Crimea. Kyiv is pushing Vladimir Putin into a corner, both with the attacks on Crimea and the attacks in the depths of Russia. The latest operation organized by the Ukrainian forces has caused a great shock around the world. Ukrainian forces, which use Bayraktars very actively in all operations, destroyed the Russian air defense systems in Crimea. The Russian army, which also actively uses S-300 air defense systems, was doomed to defeat again with this operation of Ukrainian forces. When Putin heard about this operation of the Ukrainian forces, he officially went crazy and made moves that resonated around the world. Although the whole world argued that Putin should not have made this move, Putin sent S-400 air defense systems to Crimea. However, the Ukrainian army, which learned how to make the shipment of these S-400s on their way to Crimea, made an incredible move. The whole world is talking about this operation. In recent times of the Russia-Ukraine war, Ukrainian forces have started to organize many successful operations with their advanced strategies. With the latest operation of Ukraine, Russia has become nothing in Crimea thanks to the intelligence provided by the Ukrainian forces with Bayraktars. It detected the location of the S-300 air defense systems. Upon receiving this intelligence, Ukrainian forces immediately launched Bayraktar waves towards this region. After this defeat of the Russian army, Putin decided to take an incredible step. Bayraktar unmanned aerial vehicles play a major role in Ukraine's ability to establish such superiority over the Russian army. Since the very beginning of the war, the Ukrainian army, which manages to use Bayraktars in the best way, makes good use of this advantage. Bayraktars, which play a major role in many successes both on land and in the air, have managed to be the most crucial point in this major operation. Russia did not think that any attack would come because of the deployment of S-300 air defense systems in Crimea. However, the advanced technology, weapons, and intelligence of the Ukrainian forces continue to create great difficulties for the Russian army. First of all, the Ukrainian army determined the location of the S-300 air defense systems, thanks to the agents it kept as a result of great efforts within the Russian army. Ukrainian agents in the Russian army stated that this location was near Sevastopol. Following this intelligence received by the Ukrainian forces, Bayraktars, one of Ukraine's most reliable and successful weapons, were sent to the region, and a great preparation was started. A total of 12 Bayraktars took off towards this region. The S-300 air defense systems, which detected Ukraine's Bayraktars in a short time, started their defensive attacks. However, with their advanced maneuverability, the Bayraktars were not affected in any way by these attacks and managed to dodge them. Bayraktars, which easily managed to reach the position where the S-300s were located, launched kamikaze attacks as the S-300s entered the range. It was reported that 2 Bayraktars were shot down during the attack, and 3 Bayraktars were shot down while dodging bullets. However, the S-300 defense systems, which Russia praised and even called the best air defense systems in the world, were completely destroyed by Bayraktar UAVs. Putin, who received the news of this operation, took a big decision and ordered to send S-400 defense systems to Crimea to ensure security in the region. However, knowing that the Kerch Bridge was in great trouble, Putin realized that this shipment could not be made by land in any way. With this in mind, Putin first thought of transporting these S-400s by air, but fearing the long-range Patriot missiles that the United States recently provided to Ukrainian forces, Putin realized that he could not make the shipment by air. After this analysis, Putin decided to send the S-400 air defense systems to Crimea by sea. This surprised the Russian commanders, and they thought that this shipment was a mistake. However, Putin ignored the warning of his commanders and started to place the S-400 defense systems on the ship to fulfill his idea. At this point, Israeli intelligence, which played a major role in many places, became one of the most crucial points of the operation. The Israeli intelligence line, which informed the Ukrainian forces from which port the Russian S-400s would be taken, mobilized the Ukrainian forces. The port Israel mentioned was Sevastopol, where the old S-300 systems were located. Israel did not stop there. The intelligence it provided made another big move. A big reason for the success of the Ukrainian forces in this operation is the worst strategy used by the Israeli army. Having received the news that the Russian ships carrying the S-400 were on their way and sailing on the water, Ukrainian forces carried out a major operation for this operation. This work was to lure the Russian ships to the position where the biggest blow would be struck. Since the port of departure of the ships was already known, the route that the Russian ship would follow was completely known. Ukrainian forces placed many sea mines in the Black Sea to lure these ships to the point they wanted. After this plan, Putin's worst fear came true. Although the Ukrainian forces wanted to hit these ships with long-range Patriots and HIMARS sent by the US, the power of the S-400 defense systems managed to stop these missiles. After these missiles were fired, the Ukrainian forces were shot down by the Bayraktars they had launched for reconnaissance purposes. However, Putin had no way of knowing that there was a plan behind all of this. Immediately after Israel provided this intelligence, the Ukrainian army had laid sea mines at several points near Sevastopol. This missile rush against the Russian army was not intended to hit the ships, but to retreat to the desired area to avoid another missile attack. The Russian army did what the Ukrainian forces wanted most and ordered the ships to move south. The Ukrainian army was able to direct the ships to the south where they wanted to go. Putin gave the task of transporting these S-400s to his most trusted and well-known ship. This ship was known for its air defense systems and, as we said, its robustness. It was as if the route of the ship carrying the S-400 was officially told by the Ukrainian forces. This is proof of how strategically advanced the Ukrainian army is. As the Russian army entered the area where mines were laid, the mines began to explode one by one, and with the explosion of the mines, things turned completely in favor of Ukraine. The armor of the ship, known for its robustness that could not be attacked from the air, could not be pierced. But something unexpected happened. The Russian ship was greatly affected by the explosion of the mines and began to shake incredibly. With the effect of this shaking, the battery of the S-400 air defense systems it was carrying fell into the sea. Having received intelligence on the situation, the Ukrainian forces gave orders to the Bayraktars that were in the air. With the battery of the S-400s falling into the water, it became inoperable, and the ship was completely defenseless. The Ukrainian army used this incident to its advantage and started attacking the ship with HIMARS, Patriot, and Bayraktars. The ship, which was completely defenseless, was completely destroyed by the successive blows of the Ukrainian forces. This failure of the Russian army became the most talked about news in all media outlets. The fact that their most trusted weapon was neutralized by Ukrainian forces had a huge repercussion in the world, and Putin was officially ridiculed. This unbelievable operation of the Ukrainian forces went down in the history of warfare with the failures and the operations organized by the Ukrainian forces. Putin has officially become unable to appear in front of the television with this operation of the Ukrainian forces. The Russian army had no say in Crimea. The Russian army, which is experiencing a great shortage of military equipment, gives each soldier weapons dating back to the Soviet Union. Russian soldiers, who are very complaining about using these weapons, stated that Putin is blatantly sending them to the front line. Do not forget to follow us and turn on your notifications to be instantly informed about new videos. Thank you for watching.